Rest your feet by the river of life. Come to the pasture, rest by the fire. Rest as the wind blows over the plain. I can hear you call my name. Oh, I can hear you call my name. You come to the valley, come lay your head down, come rest your feet by the river of life. Come to the pasture, rest by the fire. Rest as the wind blows over the plain. I can hear you call my name. Oh, I can hear you call my name. You come to the valley, come lay your head down, come rest your feet by the river of life. Come to the pasture, rest by the fire. Rest as the wind blows over the plain. I can hear you call my name. Oh, I can hear you call my name. You come to the valley, come lay your head down, come rest your feet by the river of life. Come to the pasture, rest by the fire. Rest as the wind blows over the plain.
All right, everybody, good morning. Let's get our light fixed here. It's kind of weird where I'm doing this in the day. I don't know why it's so dark. That's weird. All right. Don't fall off there. That would be bad. Oh, for the love of God. Please. Sorry, I have to look at my armpit for a second. It's the greatest armpit you'll ever see, though. In fact, it's the most beautiful armpit. People say there's never been a more beautiful armpit. If I can hear my, hey guys, if you get here, let me know. There we go. Jeez, it's loud. Check, check. There we go. That's a little tinny, but I think we can make that work, right? All right. Good morning. If you're here, just say hello in the chat and hit the like button, and then we'll get started. Why is my sound so weird? Okay, let me know you can hear me because we had some issues with that last week, didn't we? Oh, good. I got the Facebook comments open. That's so good. I fixed it. My friend Debbie Bender, God love her, you know, the famous Debbie Bender. She is famous. Well, to me, she's famous. Oh, the sound. Let's try this. Come on now. Sometimes if I bend the boom arm too much and don't hold on to it, it falls right off the desk. And that's never good, right? All right. Hey. See if we can get some more light in here so you guys can see. I don't think that's actually any better. What is up? All right, guys. I'm sorry. You just got to give me a minute here. Let's get that all the way bright. We might need to turn this on. That's better. Yeah, my hair looked so much better. Oh, wait. I know what it is. We're using the wrong camera. Stop cam. Give me a second. Settings. Not the integrated one. That's why it's so dark. All right. Let's see how that looks. Really? Now the camera's not going to work? There we go. All right, guys. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Kay. How are you today? Look at this hair. You know, when I was a little girl, it was curly. And then I had to, as an adult, I had to take a chemotherapy drug because I got neurovasculitis. Always something weird with me. And my hair like did this thing where it's like I'm not going to be straight, but I'm not going to be curly either. I hate the way this sounds. And turn it down just a little bit. Maybe that's better. Okay. And so I hated it. I'm like, oh, be curly or be straight. Don't. And then beachy curls came in, and I'm like, hot dog, I'm in style, and I didn't even mean to be. So I just got up and washed my hair and went because, I'm not really a morning person. But anyway, if you're here, give me a hello in the chat. Make sure you hit the like button. I'm going to hit it right now because apparently it's okay to like my own videos. Did you know if you sell like a book on Amazon that you cannot, we're going to have to move this, that you cannot, you can't, that's too close. You can't leave a comment on your own book or like it. And if you do, like I have a friend, my friend Craig makes movies, and I was in one of his documentaries, and he, I love Craig. He put out a film that he really loved and was proud of, and so he went to Amazon and decided to like it. Well, then they banned him. He's not allowed to comment on anything anymore, not just his stuff. And I'm like, what is the big deal? Why do you care if anybody comments on their own stuff? So silly. But, such is life, right? So this week, or well, actually, probably for the next several weeks, we're going to be covering the book, The Return of the Gods. This is it. I know it's backwards. Your hair does the same thing. Oh, it's not just me. But it wasn't from chemo, just gray and hormones, although I've had chemo too. Yeah, it totally, I wasn't on like really high doses of it. I mean, it was on a standard dose. And my hair started falling out. I would wake up and there would be clumps of it in the bed. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy. I'll just shave it off. And I didn't think it would be that big deal to me because I'm not, I'm just me. I don't care what I look like generally. And when I shaved it off, it was like I cut off my arm or something. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much a part of me that was attached to my hair that I didn't think of. Isn't that silly? But it really, really bothered me. All right, this sound's going to make me crazy. You guys can hear, right? Check. Oh. Check. Oh. What the devil? Check. There we go. That's better. All right, let me know if I'm blowing your ears out and we can fix that. But anyway, we're going to cover The Return of the Gods. And so, of course, I'm reading ahead. But I wanted to, I got up to chapter 7 last night. We're not going to go that far, of course. I know probably many people, good morning, you have 2 inactive windows on Rumble with more watchers. I have 2 inactive windows. I don't know what that means. I have 2 inactive windows on Rumble with more watchers. I don't know what that means. I can see me on Rumble. Maybe hit refresh. There's only one open. Yeah, my Rumble looks good. Try hitting refresh, Debbie. But if you didn't have time to get the book, I don't want you to fret about that because I'm going to read. And so we'll see how good my reading voice is. So I went through it last night, and the beginning reads kind of like an epilogue, and so I'm not going to read that. And I'm going to start in chapter 3. And so when you get the book, if you want to read back and read that kind of introductory stuff, it kind of reads like a book summary. I can't think of what that's called. There's this thing that you submit when you write a book, and it's like the pitch of your book, right? Or we do our pitch for a movie, definitely. And so I'm not going to read that, but I'm going to start in chapter 3. So get settled. What are you drinking? I've got water and a protein drink. Let me know what you're drinking. If you've got coffee or tea, hopefully you didn't start with wine, but if your day's been that bad, I'm not judging you. There's Debbie. You can hear. Debbie, can you comment in the Rumble Rant section? If you followed the link in, you should be able to. Oh, there you are. I see you up there now. It was coming on the bottom there. Bulletproof coffee. Okay, see, now that's something I think that is unsafe to drink if you're going to have a podcast. Because bulletproof coffee, if nothing will get you moving, bulletproof coffee will do it. And so I would not dare risk such a thing. I make bulletproof tea, so I do like it. But I know better than to leave the house or anything for a while. But anyway, I made a new friend yesterday. I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about it. I don't want to keep you all morning because I know you have a life. But I don't know if you guys watch Uncover DC. And is it Uncover or Undercover DC? I can't remember. Anyway, it's Frankie and Tracy are on the show. And I was watching their show yesterday, and it was so funny, you guys. The reason I'm sharing this story is because of how God moves. So I watch their show, but I generally catch it on replay, or I come in too late to get the beginning part of the show. And so I end up, watching it just a little bit later, which is okay. Let's shift this a little bit. And there we go. And so I got on, and if you're watching on Apple, like on Apple TV, you can rewind to the beginning, even though it's a live stream. And so I was going to rewind to the beginning, and I'm like, oh, shoot, I'll just stop here because when their video ends, if you've rewound, it ends for you too, and then you got to go back. And so I thought, I'll just stop here for a second. And so I stopped, and right where I stopped, Tracy was talking about, and I don't know these people, Tracy was talking about how she had seen this story about this person's near-death experience. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't know she was into that. So I type in a link, and I'm like, hey, Tracy, I had a near-death experience. Here's the link. And she said, okay, I'll check it out. So I go about my day. Well, Don messages me not an hour later. I mean, after they'd finished the show and everything. And somebody he didn't know had messaged him a screenshot of Tracy's Twitter feed of a tweet she'd put on Twitter. And it was like, oh my gosh, Penny Whitbrook, please contact me at this email address. I have to talk to you, something like that, right? And he's like, do you know who this person is that sent this? And I'm like, no, I don't know who it is. And he said, well, do you know that person, Tracy? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I watch her show. And so I emailed her and had her call me, and we were on the phone for 2 hours. But what was so funny was that I had rewound that video. It's the only time she's ever talked about near-death experiences. And I had rewound that video and just randomly stopped because I was like, oh, shoot, I'm just going to go right back to where they are instead of rewinding. But I hit play, and that was what she was talking about. So I had to leave the comment and then hurry and go to where they were in the live stream, to that minute. So I could see if she got it, because I wouldn't see her response if I was rewound. And so I saw that she'd given me a response. Anyway, we ended up talking. And you guys, I have been praying for 2 years for God to bring strong women of God, strong spiritual women into my life to walk with me, because this walk is really hard. Everything that I cover, and it's just a lot of dark, and it gets taxing on a person's spirit, and it was really weighing me down. I was laying on the couch Sunday, and I looked at Don, and I was just kind of weepy. I don't know what it is with me being so emotional. I was never an emotional person, and I was emotional, but I never showed it. And I looked at him and I said, "Is there any fun left to have?" You know, I just was feeling kind of hopeless about the state of the world. And he's like, "Babe, yes, there's fun to have. I'm going to take you, we're going to do something." Because he's working a lot of hours. He used to go in at like 9 o'clock and be home by 4:30. Yes, me too, Kay. Kay says, I love those synchronicities with spirit. Um, and I just, where he's been working so much. So he leaves at 5:30 in the morning. He gets home at 5 in the afternoon, works in outside, really like with big construction equipment that he has to climb, and he has to get it ready to be re-rented. And it's just a really, really physical job. And in the weather, it's just awful. I feel so sorry for him. I'm like, you have to get something inside because this is just so hard on you. And he's going to be 63 this year, so even the guys that are in their 20s are exhausted. So you can imagine. And then now he's got to work 4 hours on Saturday. So I'm just alone a lot. And I've been the last couple of years, I've worked really hard to try to make female friends locally. And I have two, that I really hold dear. But everybody else is you guys, and I've developed really deep friendships with some of you. And I was just praying. I'm like, God, I need someone, whether close or not, that understands the things that I'm going through and what it's like to have to go through it, not to choose to, but to know that your spirit is called to do it. And so she messaged me, and it just, all of the synchronicities were crazy. I mean, right down to surgeries we'd had. And it was crazy. I just could go on and on. But anyway, it's funny how God will send you somebody who needs you just as much as you need them. And it was actually, I could feel the Holy Spirit all over us as we were talking. And I don't want to betray any confidences, but we got off the phone, and she sensed that. She sensed, I don't know if you guys have ever felt that, like when you're praying or meditating, or maybe you're listening to music, and you feel yourself kind of ascend a little bit out of yourself into that higher plane. And I could feel that, and I'm real sensitive to it, and I can kind of get there pretty easily because I've met God, and it's harder for people who haven't. But she messages me and she's like, "Gosh, I kind of feel like I'm almost floating above myself." And I thought, that's the Holy Spirit, and God has ordained this friendship. And I've not gotten that very much in life. Like I said, I've got some close friends that I know God has ordained that is going to be people that I walk with, and there's going to be things that come from it for the world. And I didn't need a lot of people. I just needed a handful. And so that's just, it's really good for me. It really lifted my spirits. And I just wanted to share that with you. I don't know if she'll be here with us this morning because she's got a life much busier than mine. But anyway, let's start our book. Let me give you just a little bit in case you weren't with us on Tuesday. I want you to know what the book is about. So it's, this is the inside leaf. Is it possible that the entities we have known as gods, the gods of the ancient world, have come back and are affecting your life right now? Could their existence explain everything that's now transforming our culture, our families, our children, our businesses, our government, our technology, everything? What is this dark trinity, and when did it come to America and the world? Exactly which gods have returned, and how have each of them changed America and the world? How do the tablets of ancient Mesopotamia and the mythologies of the gods reveal what we are now dealing with? What does the future hold? Where exactly are the gods taking us? How will it affect your life and your future? What is the most critical thing you need to know? Johnathan Cahn opens up the stunning mystery that spans the ages, from ancient Akkad, I guess that is, to New York City, and that is right now changing your world. Prepare to be blown away. So I want to give you a little bit of a background, kind of where this book's coming from and who Johnathan Cahn is, if you don't know. So Johnathan Cahn is very prophetic in his writing, and his very first book, I think it was The Harbinger, went to number 1, and or made the New York Times bestseller list. I don't know if it went to number 1, and every book is good. The Harbinger 1 and 2, Harbinger 2, I wouldn't rent the movie Harbinger 1, because it's super redundant and there's really annoying music that plays constantly in the background. But Harbinger 2 kind of sets things up, starts kind of at 9/11. And the return of the gods there. And so that gives you a little bit of background, but I wanted to start with this one because we've been covering a lot of the topics that this addresses. And so as he's writing this book, his perspective is as a Messianic Jew. So he's a Jew who believes that Christ is the Messiah. And he talks about how when the Torah was being written, when the original and their original Old Testament, when the scribes were writing that, at some point, instead of being in the Hebrew or I think the Aramaic, they started writing, or maybe it got translated into the Greek. And the Greeks, the way they translate then, when those words were translated, it took a lot away from the meaning. And so the Jews the scribes who wrote the Bible, who God spoke the words to, and, they wrote this down, kept the history and everything. They were considered Jewish mystics. And so Tracy and I got to talking about this the other day, how uncomfortable some people are about the idea of the Holy Spirit being active, people speaking in tongues, people having like these supernatural near-death experiences, or like meditating and feeling almost like you've transcended, you're out of body, and everybody gets really scared about that because they attribute that to woo-woo, that crystals and all of that kind of stuff, and it's not. We have really sanitized the Bible, and I think in its translating over time, what happened was a lot of those translations, what was in the hearts of the people who were doing the translations, was that it was important to let me back up. Have you guys ever gotten an email from somebody and been able to sense that they were upset or something, or that there was tension between you just from the email, not knowing anything about them? Maybe you could sense that, or walk into a room where people have been fighting and you can feel that energy. Well, there was this energy in the days of the Pharisees of controlling the people, making the people fearful so they would obey God. And that's not actually, we're supposed to have reverence for God, but reverence is respect. It's different than fear. It's deep, profound respect that comes out of love. And instead of that, it kind of has this feel of, and it's preached. I think a lot of it is probably that it's preached that way. There's so much, fire and brimstone and hell and damnation preached. And I'm like, you can't scare people into heaven. You can marry somebody and you can conduct yourself in such a way that person will do what you ask and do what you expect because they're fearful of you, or they don't want to have any kind of retribution for not doing it. But they're not lovingly submitting themselves to you. And I know people have a really hard time with that word, but they're not lovingly submitting themselves to you. They're submitting themselves to you to avoid conflict. And that's how I feel the Bible is preached a lot of the time, that you're just getting beat over the head with it. And I'm like, well, sure, people will turn to God out if you scare them to death, but they won't stay. If you can relate the love of God and the magic of God, and if you think that's a word that shouldn't be used with God, you're wrong. I mean, you've got an intelligence of a divine creator that is creating all of this. How is that not magic? That you set the world in motion. It's the original magic is God. It's not tricks and sleight of hand. It's God spinning this whole thing into motion. If we were just a teeny bit closer to the sun, we would burn up. And if we were just a little bit further away, we would freeze to death. This whole idea that, God did not create the world. I just would like you all to find me one example of something that is perfect. Now our world is a lot of a mess. I'm talking about the original creation of something that is perfect, that came out of happenstance or chaos. It just doesn't happen. I used to do this experiment with my students, and because I taught at the college for a while. The one you linked on Facebook. Good morning, you have two. Okay, I don't know how to fix that. Um, you have. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. It's gone. It'll come back. Hi, Debbie Bender. You're in multiple places. Um, but anyway, there's just that controlling, and I feel that spirit. I feel like people a lot of times, will go to church and they'll commit themselves to God, but they'll do it out of fear, fear of death, or as a safety plan, or because that's what you're supposed to do because you're in the church and you don't want to be, the one person who hasn't done it, or maybe it's just your safety net, and because in case it is true, you don't want to be left out. And why are we stalled here? There we go. And good morning, AJ. I haven't seen you in a while. Hello, love. And so there is this mysticism that it is okay for us to embrace. I do not know why Facebook or why Rumble keeps freezing. We're just gonna have trouble with it. If you're having trouble watching on Rumble, let me know. Hopefully it's smooth on your end. But anyway, when you're a little kid, or when you're watching a little kid, because when you're a little kid, you don't realize it. But when you're watching a little child experience things for the first time, it's magical to watch them. It just is to watch them see things new, and that's the kind of relationship that God wants. He doesn't want us following him out of some idea that it's going to be punitive if we don't. Like, I don't want you to be my friend because if you don't, you're afraid you're going to feel my wrath. I want you to be my friend because I've shown you love and because we add to each other's lives. And that's where God is. So I want you, if you kind of came up in that culture in the church, or some other way, I want you to set that aside. Okay. I want you to practice separating church experiences, especially negative ones, from God. Every atheist I've ever known, and I'm sure there are some that this isn't true for, but every atheist I've ever known has some significant church hurts, and they associate those hurts with God as though it's all one and the same. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Church is people, and people are flawed, and we mess up a lot. And the church is in a really bad place right now and needs to stop being like the world, because that's why people don't go. They can get the world in the world, and they don't have to get up early on Sunday to do it. The church is supposed to be different. It's supposed to be like watching that child open gifts again. And you know what I mean? It's supposed to be that awe and coming into the presence of a God that's love is so immense. I mean, it was, when I was with him, it was so all over me. I wish I could explain it to you guys. I've got a poem I wrote about it. I'll have to find that. But anyway, I want you to have that in your mind as we read forward. And so in the ancient Jewish mysticism, when they talk about the Israelites worshiping false gods, so they build this golden calf. What would happen is they would build these gods, right, or construct them or whatever, and the gods that exist, the gods little g that exist, they indwell those things, because the people would not follow just a golden calf that's just a statue, because you would get nothing from it. These people were dedicated to it, and so these gods would come and they would kind of possess this golden calf, and there was this spiritual relationship that took place, and it took over whole groups of people. I mean, huge amounts of the Jewish people had turned to these false gods, and God keeps telling them, come back from that. If they were just worshiping a cow, I don't think he would have been so adamant that they shouldn't do that, because just worshiping a statue doesn't change you spiritually. If that statue has been embodied by something that actually has spiritual power, that's how people follow. And we do this in our lives, you guys. There's, we idolize things we shouldn't idolize. We put these things before God. And when you do that, you separate that relationship. It's not that he's angry with you. It's like, if you have a kid who has a friend who is not good for them, that is not a safe relationship, that they're unequally yoked, right? And that your kid maybe is a follower and this kid is a leader and the path they're going down isn't good. What do you do? You don't hate your child for that. You try to tell them this isn't good for you. This is going to bring you harm. This may bring you harm that you can't come back from. Sin will take you further than you ever wanted to go and keep you there longer than you ever wanted to stay. And that's why we guide our kids in choosing friends. And so just keep all of that in mind and try to apply that as we go forward here. I'm going to read a couple comments, put them up on the screen here so you can see them. Mystical Union by John Crowder. If you haven't read this yet, you should. You'll love it. All right. Kay, will you shoot me that in an email? It's just witthealthcoaching.com or witthealthcoach. witthealthcoaching@gmail.com. Christine McCullough, welcome. God led me to you this morning, Penny. I've been following the same path. Really good message. Love, Johnathan Cahn. Well, welcome. So glad to have new friends in the group. Okay, guys, so let's start. I'm going to start in chapter 3, the shadim. Oh, let me take that comment off the screen so we kind of have a clearer view here. Not that we don't love our new friend. Well, there we go. Okay. The shadim. The gods were everywhere. Planet of the gods. They haunted the ancient world. The fact that in the past 2,000 years they have not been everywhere is an exception to the rule. For most of recorded history, the gods were in every land and enthroned on the pinnacle of every major culture and civilization, from the god of Enlil of Sumer to Ra of Egypt, Amarok of the Arctic, some of these are hard, Kukulkan of Central America, Wotan of Northern Europe, Dionysus of Greece, Obatala of Africa, Tiamat of Babylon. He goes on and on. Wherever there were people, there were gods. They reigned over nations, over cities, over cultures, over nature, over the underworld, and over the heavenlies. Their presence permeated the lives of their subjects. The people were bound to them. That the gods could appear in every land, transcending the many differences, distinctions, and barriers of culture to become a near universal part of human life is a strange and peculiar phenomenon. To modern sensibilities, the phenomenon of the gods is the product of man's imagination, his projections, his fears, desires, and fantasies. That's certainly part of the story. But what if there was more to it? What if there was another dynamic in the mix, another realm? The devastators. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses speaks of a people departing from God and turning elsewhere. They sacrificed the shadim, not to God, to gods they did not know, to new gods that had come. In turning away from God, they worshipped other gods. Those other gods are identified as the shadim. In all the Hebrew scriptures, the word appears only once more in the book of Psalms. They served their idols, which became a snare to them. They even sacrificed their sons and their daughters to shadim. The word shadim, again, stands for the gods and idols of the nations that the people of Israel turned to when they turned away from God. What does it mean? Shadim comes from the Hebrew root word shud, which means to act violently, to lay waste, to devastate that which brings destruction. In ancient Babylonian writings, the word shadim or shadu speaks of spirits, protective or malevolent. The latter case would match the root word from which the word shadim derives. A malevolent spirit would lay waste and devastate and bring destruction. The daimonia. When the ancient Jewish scholars rendered the Hebrew Bible into Greek in a translation known as the Septuagint, they had to find the right word in Greek to stand for shadim. The word they used could refer to a spirit, a principality, an occult entity, a god, little g. The word was daimonian. It is from this that we get the word demon, a malevolent or evil spirit. In the Jewish world, the shadim are demonic spirits. So the Septuagint translate Deuteronomy 32:17 this way. They sacrifice the daimonias, not to God, but to gods they did not know, to new gods that had come to them. And Psalm 106:36 through 37 is rendered, they served their idols, which became a trap for them. They even sacrificed their sons and daughters to daimonias. Writing to the believers in the city of Corinth, the Apostle Paul spoke of the sacrifices offered up on the altars of the Gentile or pagan world. The things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to daimonia and not to God. And I do not want you to have fellowship with daimonia. So Paul writes that when the Gentiles offered their sacrifice to their gods, they were actually offering them to the daimonia, the same word used in the Septuagint to stand for the Hebrew shadim, the dark or malevolent spirits. The ancient Greeks viewed the daimonia much the same way that the Babylonians viewed demons, as spirits that could be good or evil, while in the Bible, the word is used only to signify spirits of evil. So do you see what happened there? Good morning, Tanya. Do you see what happened there? When the Greeks translated that word, instead of keeping it that these spirits were malevolent, they switched it so that it could be either good or bad. And that ended up in our current translation. And I was going to tell you guys this. Let's pause a second. So we talked about Friday evening, we talked about the Bible that I use. And I have a regular King James and I have several. But this is my favorite. This is the Messianic Jewish Family Bible. And what I like about this, hold on, let me see if it tells how it did this. Okay. The Tree of Life Bible Society, founded in 2008, is a nonprofit ministry that has been commissioned by our greater community to produce and safeguard the creation of a brand new biblical text of the Holy Scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, entitled the Tree of Life Version. The Tree of Life Bible Society exists because viewing the whole Bible through an authentic Hebrew lens provides a deeper understanding of God's faithfulness to every generation. By offering unique Tree of Living, TLV? Tree of Life Bible Society Bible study tools, we create a shared language that reflects God's kingdom culture in our daily lives and proclaims Yeshua, Jesus, to the world. And there's just a bunch of really cool things in there. It's got some cool pictures. There's all kinds of stuff in the back that's really helpful. And it goes back to those original translations, which is really important because some of what is in the Bible has been translated through the Greek and it's not correct. And so this is why I really, really like this Bible. It wasn't cheap. It was $85. But it's been an investment for me for sure. I was going to see if it's got if you want to order one, you can go to tlvbiblesociety.org, tlvbiblesociety.org. So there you go. And I thought it had the Maccabees in it, but that's my other Bible. This one doesn't. Tanya says, I want to stay on your live, but I have to get my son ready for school. Hopefully I'll catch your next live. Hey, that's okay. You can always listen. You don't have to watch. And you can always watch on replay. So that's a little bit, and he is affiliated with that group. Johnathan Cahn is. Okay. The entities. All three reveal a connection that is far-reaching and profound. When the Israelites offered up their children as sacrifices, they were doing so on the altars of specific gods. Likewise, the idols to which the Gentile world offered up sacrifices represented specific deities, gods of the pagan world. In other words, the gods of ancient Canaan and Phoenicia to which the Israelites sacrificed were not simply the figments of pagan imagination, but actual spiritual entities. Likewise, the gods that the Gentiles worship and sacrifice to in the first century Roman Empire, gods with such names as Jupiter, Apollo, Vesta, Bacchus, were not simply the imagined or invented characters of a pagan mythology, but were connected to spiritual entities, the daimonia, demonic spirits. From the Old Testament Hebrew to the New Testament Greek, the revelation is clear and consistent. Behind the gods of the pagan world were the shadim, the daimonia, the spirits. Worship is connected to spirituality. Spirituality is connected to the spirit or to spirits. And spirits, as revealed in the Bible, can be either light or of darkness. Spirits of light are called angels. Spirits of darkness are called demons. And while angelic entities are by nature joined to the worship of God, demonic entities are by nature at war with the worship of God. They would thus lead one away from the worship of God, even if through the means and form of other gods. So it's not that they're not okay with God or gods, right? The ancient key. Could that which the scriptures reveal about the shadim and the daimonia provide the key to the phenomenon and mystery of the gods? Could it be the reason behind their universality, why they've transcended the vast spectrum of human culture and have manifested in every land on earth? Could it be the key behind the many similarities and convergences between the cult of the gods and the world of the occult, the overlapping of the ancient pagan rites to the gods and witchcraft? This is not, of course, to suggest that mythology is real. Mythology is mythology. But is it possible that the mythological worlds of pagan worship contain connections to the spiritual realm, shadows of the shadim and the daimonia? Could the one be affected by the other and the other by the one? Could the mythology of the gods contain revelation concerning the realm of the spirits? And could the realm of the spirits employ the mythologies of the gods? In other words, is it possible that the mythologies of the gods have in varied ways and degrees followed the spirits, the shadim and the daimonia? And is it possible as well that the shadim and the daimonia, the spirits, have in some way and to varied degrees followed the gods and utilized their mythologies for other purposes? Note, from this point forward, when the gods or a specific god is spoken of as possessing agency, consciousness, and will, it is referring to the spirits and principalities that lie and operate behind them. If the gods are spirits and the spirits are gods, then what happens when people or nations are given to them? Is it possible for entire peoples, nations, or civilizations to become possessed? Chapter 4. A civilization possessed. If the gods of the ancient world were joined to the spirits, then what happened to those peoples and nations under their dominion? The word I practiced this last night, daimonomai, is used in the New Testament to speak of the effect of a spiritual principality on an individual. It can be translated as demonized or possessed. So if behind the gods of the ancient world were spirits, we would expect the signs of the daimonomai, what a word, or demonization to manifest in those cultures that worshipped and served the gods, the signs of possession, and that is exactly what we find. Seized of the gods. The phenomenon of possession can be found in most pagan cultures of the world. Where there are gods, there is more likely to be possession. One can find the phenomenon of possession in virtually every region and people group of the world, from the Mesopotamians to the Greeks to the Romans, the Zambians, the Taiwanese, to the Eskimos, to the peoples of Africa, Asia, South and North America, and Europe. It is another example of a strange phenomenon manifesting in virtually every land and people group on Earth. Beyond that, the signs and manifestations of possession, as recorded in virtually every culture and land, are remarkably consistent. And the reason that's important is you have people that are separated by great geographical divide, and they are all experiencing this same thing. And when you see that, it's not like they could text or read Facebook or, they were isolated to their people group, but somehow these same things would come to groups that were very far apart. And that speaks to something higher, that speaks to something spiritual. And we see that, I think, even today. Hang on. Oh, Christine has the Bible and loves it. I'm so glad. It is good. All right, now where were we? If behind the gods, wait, did we read that? I should have marked it. Okay, here we go. If behind the gods were principalities, then we would expect that those who especially worshipped and communed with them would be especially vulnerable to possession. And that too is exactly what we find. In fact, the pagan world, the phenomenon of possession was often linked to the gods. The ancient Sumerians experienced the possession of the goddess Inanna. The ancient Greeks experienced the possession of the god Dionysus. Dionysus? The closer one was to the deity, the more in danger one was to possession. The priests and priestesses of the gods and goddesses were especially vulnerable. And I want you to think about how every once in a while you'll hear somebody, usually somebody in Hollywood or in music or something, and they'll say, oh, thank the goddess. So I want you to tune your ear to that when you hear it. What are the signs of possession? The Bible gives several accounts that reveal them. The symptoms of possession could include convulsions, shaking, and violent frenzies. And I used to always think, oh, those people were just having seizures and they didn't know what seizures were at the time. But a seizure doesn't cause a violent frenzy. These very same signs appear in pagan accounts of the individuals being possessed by the gods. In fact, shakings, convulsions, and violent frenzies were often the most dramatic and striking features of pagan worship. So they weren't an exception, they were features. The Oracle of Delphi. The most famous seer of the pagan world was the high priestess of the temple of Apollo at Delphi, the Oracle of Delphi. She was known as Pythia, after the mythic giant python that was said to have guarded the sacred site at Delphi. The python gave revelation and prophecy from the gods. According to Greek mythology, the god Apollo slew the python and established his own temple and his own prophetic oracle on the site. Thus, the god took the name of the serpent and became the Pythian Apollo, and as such would take possession of the oracle and speak through her. For the Greco-Roman world, the Oracle of Delphi was the epitome of divine revelation. Kings and emperors came to Delphi to inquire of her and to receive revelations from the gods. Signs of the serpent. In the pagan world, the serpent was often seen as a source of divine wisdom. But in the Bible, the serpent is a symbol of darkness, of the satanic or demonic realm. Before uttering her prophecies, the Pythia would fall into a frenzied delirium, violently shaking, moaning, shrieking, foaming at the mouth, and speaking unintelligible words. All these are classic signs of spirit possession, and indeed, even the oracle claimed to be possessed by a spirit, the spirit of the god. And so the highest realm of revelation in the ancient pagan world was occupied by a woman possessed by a spirit. Again, we see the mystery of the shadim and the daimonia. The gods and the spirits moved as one. Mass phenomenon. This opens up an even larger truth. If the oracles, the high priests, and the priestesses were possessed of the spirits, and they were each of the highest vessels of their nation's spirituality, then what about their nation? The dominion of the gods and the spirits was never confined to the temples and shrines. It permeated entire cultures and civilizations. The deity was not worshipped only in their temples and shrines, but in their homes, workplaces, marketplaces, fields, mountains, and valleys. The majority of their worshippers were not priests or officiants, but farmers, shepherds, potters, traders, everyday men, women, and children. So if the culture or kingdom worshipped the gods, and the gods were spirits, then the culture and kingdom were joined to the spirits, subject to them, and under their dominion. The signs of possession were not confined to the priesthood or temple. The shakings, The convulsions and the violent frenzies could manifest anywhere at any time and with anyone. A civilization possessed. Beyond the signs of individual possession were other signs and symptoms of a much larger phenomenon. In pagan culture, it was not uncommon for people to offer up other people as sacrifices to the gods. In some pagan cultures, people even murdered their own children in sacrifice to the gods. They did so as acts of worship. Such things were not the spontaneous acts of a possessed individual, but the ways, traditions, rituals, and collective acts of a possessed culture. The larger truth is that possession may involve more than an individual. It may involve an entire culture, nation, kingdom, or civilization. It is this phenomenon, that of collective, mass, or civilizational possession, that is critical to understand if one is to understand the radical metamorphosis that took place in ancient times, that altered world history, and the equally radical transformation taking place at this very moment. In the first century, in an unlikely place, a peripheral land of the Roman Empire known as Judea, an unlikely revolution was begun. It would change the history of the gods and of the world itself. We now journey to that unlikely place and that unlikely phenomenon that brought about the twilight of the gods. Pumpkin, I'm going to read more. Pumpkin Spice says, Penny, I'm so sorry. I know you've told us 1,000 times, but can you say one more time what your email address is? WITT, health coaching @gmail.com. And when I get done here, I'll put it in the description. I always forget and have to add it later. Now, guys, if you have questions or comments, just pop them up. And when I stop, we'll read them. Because this is all of us together, right? Not just me. Chapter 5, Twilight of the Gods. 2,000 years ago, in the midst of the Greco-Roman world, in the heartland of Galilee, in the hilltop village of Nazareth, there appeared a Jewish man named Yeshua, who would become known to much of the world as Jesus. He came as the long-prophesied Redeemer, the Messiah of Israel, and the light of the world. He would in time become the central figure of human history. The Galilean. The earliest accounts of his ministry record his performing miracles in the sight of the Judean multitudes. The lame walked, the blind received sight, and the lepers were healed. Another miracle of healing that he was recorded to have performed was described by the Greek word ekbalo. Ekbalo means to expel, to eject, to cast out, to send away. The Bible records several encounters between Jesus and those possessed or demonized by unclean spirits. In each case, he cast out the demonic spirit. In each case, the person was set free, healed, and restored to his or her right mind. Now, we wouldn't see that with seizures, would we? In each case, the person was set free. Oh, we read that. Before the end of his ministry on earth, he imparted the same power of ekbalo, the casting out of spirits, to his disciples. Emanation. In the 4th decade of the 1st century, the message of forgiveness, salvation, and eternal life in the death and resurrection of the Messiah Yeshua, or Jesus, the message that would become known as the gospel, went forth from the city of Jerusalem. It spread first throughout the land of Judea, then it went into the nations, to the Gentiles. Gentiles were just non-Jewish people. The gospel and the word of God had crossed into the pagan world. That crossing would change the course of world history. The message of God now entered the lands of many gods and idols. The ways of God now touched the ways of the pagan world. The world of God now touched the realm of mythology. The Spirit of God now moved through the world of spirits, and the disciples of God now moved through the dominion of the shadim, the daimonia. Clash of the Gods. If behind the gods were principalities, then when the two worlds met, we would expect an intense conflict, and that is exactly what took place. It was a clash of spirits. The book of Acts records several of those first clashes. In the city of Philippi, a woman possessed with the spirit of divination stalked the apostle Paul and his co-worker Silas for days. Luke, the writer of the account, uses the Greek word puthon or python to describe the possessing spirit. It is the same word used to identify the Oracle of Delphi and the spirit that possessed her, and the god behind the spirit that possessed her. Hang on just a second. Hold on. Sorry about that, guys. I thought I hit it. Let me go back. After several days, I got it. Sorry. Thank you for telling me, though. After several days of being followed or stalked, the Apostle Paul cast the spirit out of the woman. It was that casting out. It should be good now, guys. I think my mic's on. Hold on. Check. Yeah, we should be good. Maybe try refreshing. Let me give it a minute. If you guys can hear me, just let me know so that I don't keep reading. Let me see if I can hear it. Check. Yep, I've got sound. So just try refreshing. We should be back. Are we good now? Oh, that's a name. Thali. I can't even begin to say that. I thought it was my sound system. No, it's me, love. I can hear you now. Thanks. I wasn't sure. Thank you for telling me. I've gone through like whole rants and people are just not, they don't tell me they can't hear. I think they think it's on their end. In the city of Ephesus, where the disciples proclaim, I think I read that. No, we'll read it again. Where the disciples proclaim the word, perform miracles of healing, and cast out the spirits, the conflict between the gospel and the gods led to a dangerous confrontation. The idol makers of Ephesus stirred up the multitude into a fury against the word and faith that was being proclaimed. The violent rage was centered on the city's patron goddess, whom they believed was threatened by the new message and faith. The crowd chanted the name of the goddess over and over again as it sought to exact vengeance against the disciples. Okay, so I want you guys to think about where we are now and the backlash that we see against believers, people of faith, or just basically moral people. You know, we see violence against them. And so this is starting to sound like something that's recurring. Fury of the gods. The rage of the pagan world against the gospel would grow so fierce that in time, believers would be imprisoned, crucified, burned, and sent into the arenas to be killed as entertainment before cheering spectators. The fury of the gods and the ferocity of the spirits were now deadly. In the early years of the 4th century, the Roman Emperor Diocletian launched what would become known as the Great Persecution. The number of Christians arrested became so great that common criminals had to be released from Roman prisons in order to make room. Beyond imprisonment, Diocletian's persecution would lead to the torture and execution of countless believers in Jesus. I need my pillow. It's gone missing. I'm sitting on it. Too short. The Great Persecution, with its deadly fury, was rooted in the gods. It was launched on the day called Terminalia, the festival of the Roman god Terminus, lord of boundaries and endings. The persecution was intended to bring about the end of faith in Jesus and the termination of his followers. Christians would be commanded to offer sacrifices to the pagan gods. If they refused, they would be imprisoned or killed. The Oracle's War. But there is a story behind the story. The great persecution had its origin in the city of Didyma, I don't know, in the hilltop temple of Apollo by the Aegean Sea. It was there that the Emperor Diocletian sent a delegation to have an audience with the temple's oracle. It was believed that the gods were angry at the new faith. It was believed that the gospel was interfering with the ability of the gods to transmit prophecies to their priests and priestesses. The delegation came with a question for the oracle. The emperor wanted to know whether he should launch a persecution against them. The oracle's response gave Diocletian the answer he needed. He was to make war against the believers and the new faith. So the greatest persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire was launched by a woman possessed by a spirit, one of the shadim, the daimonia, the spirit of a pagan god. The Great Exorcism. In the end, it was not the gods that prevailed, or the might of the Roman Empire, or the words of the oracle. Against all odds, the overwhelmingly powerless followers of the crucified Redeemer overcame the fires of persecution, and the message of the gospel of God's love and forgiveness overcame the reign of the gods. You notice the message of the gospel of God's love and forgiveness, not God's wrath. That's what won people. The polytheism and pantheism of the Greco-Roman world gave way to the belief in one God, and the mythological consciousness of ancient paganism yielded to the Word of God and to a salvation that had manifested in time and space. Myth yielded to history. The spell of the gods was broken. The skies were no longer filled with their thrones, and the earth was no longer their haunting ground. Their names no longer inspired fear and awe. Their festivals attracted fewer and fewer worshippers. Their shrines were abandoned. Their temples fell into ruin. It was the twilight of the gods. But if behind the gods were the spirits, then when the spell of the gods was broken, we would expect the signs of possession to dissipate. And so they did. The frenzied spirit possessions of the pagan priests, priestesses, oracles, and worshippers became an increasingly rare phenomenon. The carnal and licentious acts of pagan worship and rituals were banned from the public sphere, and human sacrifice became a distant memory. The breaking of the spell. The breaking of the spell and its repercussions went far beyond the realm of pagan worship. The degradation of human life that was typical of paganism yielded before the new belief that life was sacred. The individual was also sacred and so possessed immutable rights. Women were likewise sacred and were to be treated as equal heirs of the kingdom. And the poor and the weak were no less created in the image of God than were the rich and powerful. They were to be treated accordingly as equals. Every life was now of inestimable value and equally precious in the sight of God. Every realm of society was affected. Sexuality was now to be treated as a sacred gift from God, to be honored and kept in the equally sacred vessel of marriage. As for little children, they were no longer to be abused or mistreated. To take their lives because they were unwanted was now a crime. As for emperors and rulers, governments and kingdoms, they could no longer claim the authority of godhood. They too were subject to God's laws and standards, as was everyone. So the twilight of the gods would transform the Roman Empire and the Western civilization. The Greek word ekbalo, used in the New Testament to describe Jesus casting spirits out of individuals, now took on a colossal dimension. The casting out now applied to an entire empire. The gods had been cast out of their temples, their cities and lands, from Western civilization itself. And if behind the gods were the spirits, then the casting out of the gods represented the greatest mass exorcism in world history. My hall has fallen. What happened to the Oracle of Delphi, the pinnacle of pagan revelation and its most exalted case of spirit possession? In the year 362, the pagan Roman emperor known as Julian the Apostate attempted to restore the oracle's temple to its former glory. He sent a representative to consult her. She sent back a word that would become known as her last pronouncement. It is recorded that she said this: "Tell the emperor that my hall has fallen to the ground. Phoebus, the god Apollo, no longer has his house, nor his mantic bay, nor his prophetic spring. The water has dried up." The gods had been exiled. The possessing spirits had been cast out. No longer could they take possession as they had in earlier days, nor could they direct empires with their prophetic utterances. Their oracles had grown silent. Exiles, and I want you guys to think about that. Think of everything that is going on right now. I mean, I am at the point of having to really fight to not lose hope that God will overcome this. And then I read this and I'm like, he overcame this in mass. Entire civilizations were won by the love of God, by the love of Jesus. And those dark gods that would have them sacrifice people and sacrifice their own children in frenzied fits of rage, that was gone. That was cast out just by the love of God. And so if it could happen then when entire civilizations were possessed, it can happen now. Exiles and exorcisms. It was an end and a new beginning. The driving out of gods and spirits that took place in the Roman Empire would now take place beyond its borders. It would happen in every place in which the gospel was received. Each time it happened, the signs of possession, individual and civilizational, would begin to disappear. No longer would the Germanic tribes gather in the forest to hang their victims on sacred trees as sacrifices to their god Odin. No longer would the Slavs offer up their prisoners and slaves as sacrifices to their god Perun. And no longer would the Aztecs tear out the beating hearts of their victims in honor of their sun god, I am not even going to try to pronounce that, which had happened in the Roman Empire, would be repeated throughout the earth, or what had happened in the Roman Empire. Civilizations were exorcised. The gods lost their hold and the spirits departed. The phenomenon of a civilization set free from the gods and cleansed of the spirits was something new to world history. It had never before happened. The phenomenon was unique to Western civilization. It would radically alter the course of that civilization than that of the world itself. The worship of gods may come to an end, but principalities and spirits do not. They go on. What then became of the gods and spirits? And if they did go on, could they not one day return? And if they did return, what would happen? To bring the mystery into modern times, we must uncover one more ancient puzzle piece. Chapter 6, The House of Spirits. Could the last clue be found in an ancient parable? The parable. The final puzzle piece lies in an ancient passage recorded in the New Testament, the words of Yeshua, Jesus, given to his disciples. A parable within which is a revelation of profound, massive, and prophetic ramifications for the modern world and our own day. He said this: "When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places," meaning the spirit, "seeking rest and finds none. Then he says, 'I will return to my house from which I came,'" meaning the person. What does it mean? And how does it relate to the matter of the gods? And what significance could it contain concerning modern times? The House of Spirits. The passage speaks of a man possessed by an unclean spirit. The man is delivered of that spirit. The spirit then wanders through dry places, presumably the desert, but finds no place to rest. It then decides to return to its house, the formerly possessed man. But when it returns, it finds that its former dwelling place, the man, is empty, swept clean, and set in order. The cleansed state of the vessel leads the spirit to go and bring back 7 other spirits more evil than itself. So the man is now possessed by 7 other spirits in addition to the original one. He is thus now in a worse condition at the end than he was at the beginning. At first glance, it would seem that the parable is talking about a possessed and delivered man who then becomes repossessed. It certainly could be applied to a possessed individual, but the parable is actually not about the man at all. It's an illustration, an example, an analogy used to reveal a spiritual principle and give a prophetic warning. Spirits of Rome. The key comes in the last words of the parable. After stating that the last state of the man is worse than the first, Jesus adds, "So shall it also be with this wicked generation." Thus, the parable is not about individual possession, but collective or mass possession, the possession of a generation, a culture, a civilization. The parable's immediate application appears to be the generation that lived in first century Judea. But the principles revealed in the parable extend far beyond the age and borders of that nation. They apply to Western civilization as a whole and span the entire age into the modern world. How so? 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire and Western civilization comprised a house of spirits, a civilization possessed of gods and spirits. But into that house came the Word of God, the Spirit of God, the gospel. Western civilization was thus set free from the spirits and became, as in the parable, a house set in order, a civilization cleansed. So then what happened to the principalities? The parable answers that. The spirits still exist, but now dwell outside the house. So in the case of Western civilization, the spirits that once possessed it still existed, but now dwelled outside the borders of that civilization. They roamed the dry places, the desolate lands. They dwelled in the shadows. They dwelled in exile. Return of the spirits. The spirit in the parable finds no rest, so it seeks to return to its house to repossess it. When Jesus was about to cast the spirits out of the possessed man, known as the demon, it is recorded that the spirit pleaded with him to be cast into a nearby herd of pigs. The spirits are parasitic. They need a host to possess. Thus, the spirits cast out of Western civilization, if they find no rest, if they find no comparable civilization to possess, will seek to return to what they believe is their house. And thus we would expect that the same spirits that once possessed Western civilization would seek to do so again. But the question must be answered. How could the spirit return to the house from which it had been dispossessed? The empty house and the 7 others. It could only do so if the house has become unoccupied, empty, and the door has been left open. The parable continues. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. The house is clean and set in order because of its initial deliverance or exorcism, and yet the implication is that no one is now living there. The house was left empty, thus it is open to being reoccupied. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. Since the house is clean, swept, and in order, the spirit brings in seven other spirits to join in the repossession. The implication is that if the house had not been cleansed and set in order, the spirit would not have brought back the other spirits to occupy it. The darker state. And therein lies the warning. The house that is cleaned and put in order but remains empty will be repossessed. And if it should be repossessed, it will end up in a worse state than if it had never been cleansed. What happens if we apply this to an entire civilization? It would translate to this. Should a culture, a society, a nation, or civilization be cleansed, exorcised of the gods and spirits, but then remain or become empty, it will be repossessed by the gods and spirits that once possessed it and more. And it will end up in far worse state than if it had never been cleansed or exorcised at all. It will, according to the parable, end up many times more possessed and evil than before. The door to repossession. But in the case of Western culture, how would it happen? How would the spirits re enter the house from which they were cast out? How would the gods return? In the scriptural account of exorcisms, the spirits are cast out by the word and power of God and in the name and authority of Jesus. When the Roman Empire and Western civilization were delivered from the spirits and gods, it happened the same way, by the word and power of God and by the name and authority of Jesus. Therefore, how could the spirits and gods return to Western civilization? Only one way. If that civilization should ever turn away from God, from his word, from the gospel, from Christianity, from Jesus, if it should do so, then that which drove out the spirits will no longer be present to protect it against their return. And the civilization that had been delivered of the spirits will become repossessed by them. The gods will return. Pre-Christian versus post-Christian. And what would happen then? According to the parable, the repossessed house will end up far worse than at the beginning. Taken into the realm of world history, it means this: a post-Christian civilization will end up in a far darker state than a pre-Christian civilization. If Western civilization turns away from God, what will come of it will be much darker and far more dangerous than it was in its days of paganism. It is no accident that the modern world, and not the ancient, has been responsible for unleashing the greatest evils upon the world. And it is no accident that when nations and civilizations that had once known God turned away, when they turned against the Christian faith they had once received, what then came upon them would often be described in terms of the demonic. A pre-Christian civilization may produce a Caligula or a Nero, but a post-Christian civilization will produce a Stalin or a Hitler. A pre-Christian society may give birth to barbarity, but a post-Christian society will give birth to even darker offspring: fascism, communism, and Nazism. A pre-Christian nation may erect an altar of human sacrifice, but a post-Christian nation will build an Auschwitz. For a nation or civilization that had once known God, that was once delivered of the gods and spirits, to then turn away from God is a most dangerous thing. The gods will return to it. It is not for us now to open up the mysteries behind the return of the spirits and gods to such nations and powers as the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany, but it is for this book to open up the mystery behind the return of the gods and spirits in our own day and to our own culture and civilization, the return of the gods to America and Western civilization, and by these to the world. It is a mystery that touches all of us, just as the working of the gods and spirits is now touching, altering, and transforming the world around us. If the gods were to return to the modern world and to America, how would they do so? If there's an ancient template that reveals the answer, or is there? And what is the dark trinity? Guys, still with me? The dark trinity. We're not going to read much more because I want to have time to talk. Carol says, "It's so good to see you are healing. Sending love." Thank you, Carol. I'm sure trying to heal up. Chapter 7. A word before the revealing. What we're about to see will touch on subjects, issues, and events that are now impacting the modern world, but it will do so in a new light. There are individuals and groups on every side of every issue. This is not about any individual or group, but about the gods, the spirits, and the principalities. I want you to remember that. It is so easy for us to pin some level of immorality or malfeasance to a person, but the Bible is clear. We do not fight against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. Christine says, let me pop that up, Christine. This book explains exactly what is going on in the USA. We need to keep our eyes on God and support each other in faith. Exactly. Because should we fall away and we become empty, I wrote a poem about hopelessness. I'll read that when we're done. Should that happen to us, then we become empty, and then the gods enter in, the spirits come and bring more. Okay? We are the hope. The mystery cannot be directed. It exists apart from anyone's opinion, desire, or will. The chips must fall where the mystery will have them fall. There is no us or them in what is about to be opened. There is only us. The mystery of the gods and the dangers revealed in that mystery apply equally to all and with no distinction. On the walls of the ancient city stood the watchman. If the watchman saw a coming danger, an enemy army, the approach of destruction, it was his charge to sound the alarm and warn the people. If he kept silent, they would perish, and he would be guilty of their blood. The mystery of the gods concerns nations, civilizations, the world, and everyone in it. It speaks of life and death, good and evil, danger and the warning of danger, calamity and redemption. To be aware of such things and not reveal them would be to act as a watchman who sees the approach of danger and keeps silent. It would be a moral breach to not reveal it. So even though these can be tough topics and these can be things that people don't want to hear, we are charged as the watchman to reveal it, to talk about it. The mystery of the gods concerns nations. Oh, I read that. At the same time, the revealing of the mystery, as with the sound of a watchman's alarm, will by nature cause a disturbance. No true watchman sounds the trumpet to cause a disturbance. He does so knowing that only by sounding it will those who will awaken, and those who will be saved, be saved. The greatest commandment is love. With regard to what is about to be revealed, there is no room for any other response but love and compassion, for we are all in the same boat. We must stand for what is right and against what is not. We must shine the light into the darkness, and we must do it all manifesting the truth in love. And I know we get angry and frustrated and just incensed that these dark things are trying to take over, and that's okay. Those are natural emotions. We're going to feel them, but we cannot let that be our guide in how we deal with people, um, lest, lest it take us as well. Because if we give ourselves over to that spirit of anger and hostility and otherizing people, and that doesn't mean you have to accept the things that people are doing. You can know that those things are wrong. We're all doing something wrong. Every day we do something wrong. But we have empathy for the person, because we know that there are these higher forces at work and that they could also be at work at us, but for the grace of God go I. We read that. In the book of Ephesians, the Apostle Paul makes clear a critical distinction. We do not war, I just said that. We do not war against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. And there are different realms of heaven. So, in case you didn't know that, thank you for sharing this. You're welcome, Mary Louise. What a beautiful name. The book will be the uncovering of those principalities, powers, rulers, and hosts, as they affect all, without distinction, and as the issues involved are of life and death. The directive of love is all the more critical. And in this case, love warrants the speaking of truth. And this is a thing. I think the society has gotten this idea that because we speak against something that is inappropriate and harmful, that we're haters. No. If my child is is adamant that he wants to touch the stove, and I swat his hand away and I say, no, no, hot, is that me denying his truth? It's just so foolish. Of course not. I'm trying to push him away from harm. And so in speaking the truth, yes, we're going to be persecuted and we're going to be called all manner of things. But just because you don't like the truth doesn't make it not true. So that means we have to keep speaking it. Don't be convinced by people that you should shut up. Speak your truth in love. We have 4 kids that were raised by us, and none of them are believers. Now, I think the youngest 2 probably have an opening for it, but they have been swayed by the logic and the rationality of the world despite being raised by us. So it can happen. That so brings it home. And I've had so many of you reach out that I'm praying for who've said, you've got a family member or members or entire families who have embraced this radical new culture despite, all along walking in the truth until now. Did I read that? Yes. With that said, we now move to its revealing as we open up the mystery of the dark trinity. And I wanted to welcome Eric. Welcome, Eric. We don't get a ton of guys in here. Of course, some of the names, there's no way I could tell. Okay, my kids too. Okay, I will be praying about that. Eric says, I'm a Christian universalist. Love your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. That's very kind. Chapter 8, the Dark Trinity. I promise we're not going to read this whole book. I'm just looking for a natural stop. If the gods were to return, if they were to re-enter Western civilization, how would they do it? And what gods would they be? That would not come as they had in ancient, they would not come as they had in ancient times. A modern world requires a different approach. And a world that has been touched by the gospel and had known the word of God was far different from the pre-Christian and pagan world that had not. So the gods would alter their appearances and hide their identities. It would begin in the shadows, on the fringes of American society and Western culture. It was there that the gods gained their first footholds, and from there they began their steady and progressive penetration of mainstream culture. But their ultimate object was not infiltration, but domination. The opening of the door. The gods could only return if there had been a falling away from the Christian faith and a biblical worldview. No single event or date can be pinpointed as the beginning of that falling away. It was a process. But there were milestones, turning points, and moments of critical mass. In the mid to late 20th century, America's departure from God became increasingly discernible. The nations of Western Europe were in the midst of a similar departure. The falling away would continue through the end of the 20th century and into the 21st unabated, deepening, widening, increasing in magnitude and momentum. This time period, the late 20th and early 21st century, represented the most widespread and massive falling away from the Christian faith and morality in the entire 2,000-year history of the Christian age. The falling away would go hand in hand with the return of the ancient spirits. America was the leading nation of the era and focal point of the post-World War II order. What would happen to American culture would touch the world. If the spirits could enter and gain possession of the American house, they could possess the age. The spiritual DNA. But if the gods were returning, then which gods? America is not made up of any one ethnicity or people group, but many, almost all. In many ways, America is a composite and summation of Western civilization. So then what gods could relate not to one nation or ethnicity within Western civilization, but to all of them, or to Western civilization as a whole? The answer goes back to ancient Israel. The faith of Western civilization comes from ancient Israel. The Bible consists of the writings of Israel, the Psalms of Israel, the Chronicles and history of Israel, the prophecies of Israel, and the gospel of Israel. The spiritual DNA of Western civilization comes from, and in many ways is, the spiritual DNA of ancient Israel. Seduced by other gods. In the case of America, the connection is even stronger. As Israel was consecrated to God from its inception, so was America. America was established after the pattern of ancient Israel. And think about that, the Israelites were held in captivity by Egypt. And they ended up leaving, Moses let them out. And God separated the sea for them to cross over, to be separate from Egypt. And, are we not seeing that now? America was established after the pattern of Israel. In its founding days, the Puritan leader, John Winthrop, gave the new civilization a charge based on Moses' charge to the Israelites. If America followed the ways of God, he said, It would become the most blessed, prosperous, and powerful of civilizations. But he also gave a prophetic warning. But if our hearts shall turn away, so that we will not obey, but shall be seduced, and worship and serve other gods, our pleasure and profits, and serve them, we shall surely perish. So if you don't know who John Winthrop is, John Winthrop, um, so let me get this right. Our capital at one time, I think, was Boston. I'm going to have to read back up on this. And Winthrop um, established that and was the governor of Boston, is how it's said. I don't know how Boston has a governor, but I think meaning just somebody who governs. And he's the one giving this warning. So America at its inception was given the same warning that Israel was given at its inception. It was warned against turning away from God and to the gods. It was warned against the seduction of the gods, just as the gods had seduced Israel, the gods of apostasy. And in this is the key that answers the question. The gods, or spirits, that have returned to America and Western civilization are the same gods and spirits that seduced ancient Israel in the days of its apostasy. In other words, if the nation founded after the pattern of ancient Israel, America, should apostatize from God, then it would become subject to the same gods and principalities that ancient Israel became subject to in its apostasy from God. And this is important because we know that if we forget our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And this is a history that the majority of people don't know. And so it coming back, we don't know it's a coming back. We see it as this new strange thing. And what are people being taken over by? Well, had we known the history, we would be able to look back and say, oh my goodness, we're going the way of Israel. The dark trinity. And I mean Israel in the days of the Bible. So then what were the gods of Israel's apostasy? There were several, but 3 of them were of special prominence. The 3 gods embodied the apostasy itself. One of the 3 remained something of a mystery. Another of the 3 was both one and many. And the other changed identities and appearances depending on the time, place, people, and culture. Much like God can do. God appears in so many ways through people, through nature. He appears. His love for us is so individual that when he shows us love in an individual way that we would see it, right? As for America, though there are many spirits and principalities, it is the same dark trinity that is most prominent in its fall from God, just as it was in Israel's fall from God. As they transformed ancient Israel, they are now transforming America and Western civilization, and through this, the world. The re-paganization. Pagan spirits inhabit pagan vessels. Pagan gods indwell pagan cultures. What would happen then if the ancient pagan gods returned to a civilization based on a Judeo-Christian foundation, worldview, and a moral framework? What would happen is that their return would trigger a metamorphosis. The Christian or biblically based culture would begin transforming into a pagan one. Christian values would be replaced by pagan values, Christian ethics by pagan ethics, and Christian worldview by a pagan worldview. We would witness the paganization of American civilization and the repaganization of Western civilization. We now uncover the mask behind the first of the 3 gods, the dark trinity, the possessor. And that's where we're going to stop, because I got to leave you hanging, right? So what do you think? Is it starting to, it's so funny. I'm going to give you something that we can relate this to. I have a friend named B. Geyer, and he used to work for the Department of Justice as an attorney. And he's since retired, and he runs a group called Former Feds. And they're involved in all kinds of work. Really, they got really active during COVID, kind of trying to set up a parallel medical infrastructure and financial infrastructure for people who were being canceled. Patients who couldn't get surgery because they wouldn't get the shot, that sort of thing. And we were talking about this whole COVID thing, and he kept saying to me, okay, I get, the media and the government and big pharma and all that, but I can't understand, why would doctors and nurses do this? Why would their character so dramatically shift? And we puzzled on that for a year. And one day I was reading, and I read that the highest number of deaths came from nursing homes that were in the ownership of venture capitalists, or I never can think of what the other word is, venture capitalists, and I can't think of it, the likes of BlackRock, Vanguard, these big companies that just own 90% of the world's wealth. And I thought that interesting. And so I started thinking back on my nursing career. So in 2002, I graduated from nursing school. And while I was in nursing school, we did narrative charting. So, I would come into the room to see Eric, and I would give him the good once over, and then I would write a narrative note. I would say, Eric, was admitted for an open appendectomy, complication of sepsis post-op. Today he blah, 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 right? The rule was that if you drop dead during your shift, somebody should be able to pick up your notes and understand that patient so well that they can just pick up the care seamlessly. Okay. Well, within months of my graduating from nursing school, we went to a new computer system for charting that had you only chart by exception. They didn't want you to write narrative notes because narrative notes created liability. They didn't want you expounding. And so what happened was charting by exception. So everything that you could chart on, all the boxes that you could pick, had the letters WNL. So if you assessed the belly, that would mean the bowel sounds were active in all 4 quadrants. The belly was soft, non-tender, non-distended, and just in good order. Well, instead of writing all of that, you would just check WNL within normal limits, and you would only write a narrative note if something was outside the normal limits. Well, what kind of depth of understanding do you think that gives you about the patient if I drop dead? It doesn't. It doesn't. It's a sanitized version of what's going on, and it hurts patient care, and I hated it. And so there was this end part of the charting where you could write a narrative note, and they tried to make it as small as they could. And I would try to squeeze every little thing in there that I could because it was in me to do narrative notes. And then I would get scolded for that. Well, after that came standing orders. So we had standing orders for, the most common things that people would be admitted for: congestive heart failure, myocardial infarction, cerebrovascular accident, all of that. And so what it is, it's this page, and it's the same plan of care for everybody. And the text, they came in big packs of paper, and here's all the ones for CHF, and here's all the one for heart attack, and all of that. So when the techs would set up the charts, or the unit secretaries would set up the charts, they would put that in the chart and flag it, and the doctor would just come in and sign it, and everybody with CHF would get the same treatment, which is insane because everybody is different. And if he didn't want something, he would just one line it and initial it, and if he wanted something added, he would do that. But for the most part, they would go with the standing orders. The other thing that happened was the hospital started purging family doctors from the hospital, because family doctors would not bend to the will of the hospital. So if they felt like a patient wasn't ready to go home, it didn't matter what nonsense what trouble the insurance was giving them. His patient wasn't ready to go home, and he wasn't sending them home, right? And he knew you. Well, what they went to was the system of hospitalists and intensivists. These are doctors that are also trained in hospital administration. They have a very different directive. Their job, in as well as doing patient care, but they must do patient care within the context of flipping those beds, getting those patients, getting the most reimbursement, and getting the patient out as quick as they could. Because we wanted to flip those beds, because you want to keep profits up. So patients were being sent home before they were ready, because this person is just a hospitalist who only knows you for your hospital stay. You can't see them when you leave. You might be able to see your specialist, but not your hospitalist or intensivist because they work for the hospital. That's a huge problem. If you work for the hospital, you're beholden to the hospital and you must do what they say lest you lose your job. So when I realized that venture capital and private equity, that was the word, private equity, when I realized that they had taken over huge nursing home systems, huge hospital systems, entire clinic networks, then I understood. I'm like, okay, so when they do this, you cannot have a businessman over a medical system. So they hire a doctor in name only. And that, what is that noise? Weird. Um, and so, forgot where I was. Help me, guys. Anyway, their job was to get you out quick and to code. And so then they got coders, and they always had coders, but they would train these coders to code people at the highest level of reimbursement. So like when I did home nursing, we lost our coder. She went somewhere else. And so the nurses were charged with, here's driving me crazy. The nurses were charged with coding, and the agency just lost their minds because we would code for the most simplest basic thing we were seeing the patient for. We weren't upcoding. And upcoding is not allowed, but it is done universally. And we wouldn't do it. Many of us wouldn't do it. We would say, well, I'm not coding for that. So if you're going to see a patient at home and they've had a heart attack, but they're recovered from the acute event, and maybe I'm just seeing them for activity intolerance. And so I would code it as activity intolerance. And they're like, no, you have to code that as exacerbation of congestive heart failure or whatever, because that brings more money. But that's not what I'm not managing that exacerbation. That exacerbation has been settled and now they're home. But that's how they wanted us to code it. And so I would refuse. And so when I put it all together, I texted B and I said, B, I know why. I know why they're giving the remdesivir. I know why they're chalking the deaths up to COVID when the deaths are obviously from drug toxicity to remdesivir and lack of proper care, lack of even supportive care. When you won't even check vitamin D or C levels, basic things, how are you giving supportive care? Supportive care would have us get that patient to a normal baseline so that they have everything they need to be able to recover. But instead, they would know the vitamin D level was non-existent, vitamin C level non-existent, reduced glutathione non-existent, iron levels in the floor. And they would just leave all of those things and just think COVID, COVID, COVID. And I'm like, okay, but that's fine. If you could provide some helpful medical treatment. But all you're doing is providing supportive care that is in no way supportive. What you're doing is you're providing harmful care. Oh, Christine, I bet. Christine's a nurse. She said this resonates with her. Thanks for reading this to us. I dislike reading, so this is a blessing. Pamela, check out Audible. Audible is a great resource. I normally would read 3 to 5 books a week. Now with Audible, I can get through a book in a day and just have it on while I'm working. But yes, it's all about the money. And now it makes sense to me how we couldn't convince doctors, we couldn't convince nurses to do standard things that we would do for, if you were admitted for complications related to the flu. So, a bilateral pneumonia related to the flu and myocarditis related to the flu. When we checked your labs, if something was off, we addressed it. I was seeing patients, or, people were contacting me and I was looking through charts of patients, and, this patient just was, go to the hospital and just get worse and worse and worse. And so I would look at the labs, and there's this thing that we check called a procalcitonin. And if procalcitonin is elevated, it's an early predictor of sepsis. So I would see the person's white count, your white blood count, your white blood cells are phagocytic. And so they eat bad things. They go and they clean up areas that are sick or injured or unwell. And in early sepsis, you'll see, so 5 to 10,000 is normal. So let's say this patient has a white blood count of 7,000. Good deal. Procalcitonin's normal. So you're like, okay, now if you're in the ICU, your labs are checked every day. So there's no excuse for missing it. And when I would come into work, I would pull up the patient's labs for the last week and I would look for trends. Because the easiest way to spot something early when you can fix it is to catch the trend, right? And nobody ever taught me that. It just seemed common sense to me. And so when I was precepting nurses, baby nurses, not nurses that deliver babies, but nurses who are new nurses, when I would precept them, I would bring that holistic view. And what has happened is that holism is gone. It's gone. Body systems are treated as though they act independently. So I was talking to my friend yesterday and I was explaining to her that, is it someone screaming? Oh, okay, no. It's like some kind of high-pitched mechanical device. Oh, I'm all over the place this morning. I'm so sorry I'm not focused. I haven't had coffee. And I'm thinking of it. Give me a second. Son of a gun. Christine, help me out. Where was I? You're a nurse. I know you were following that. So I would look for these trends. That was it. So I would look for these trends. Well, in these patients that had COVID, I would look through the chart and like a patient would have a chest tube. And the thyroid, that's what I was going to talk about. The patient would have a chest tube and the patient would get a chest x-ray every day because they're in the ICU. And that lung that had collapsed had resolved. And that chest tube was still in place 2 weeks later. That is insane. And so what do? They set up infection where the chest tube is. And now you've got that to deal with. And it was just these big things that were getting missed. So I was talking to my friend Tracy and I was explaining to her that the thyroid is one of the most poorly understood organs in the body, or glands, I guess. I cannot tell you how many doctors do not realize that if a person's thyroid function is not normal, their blood sugar will go up, their blood pressure will go up, and their sex hormones will get out of whack. And so what you will see is a doctor put a patient on a thyroid medicine, the patient not feel any better, and all they're checking is a TSH. Well, TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone, and it's not made by the thyroid, it's made by the pituitary. And so they feel like if that is within normal limits, then the thyroid must be fine. Well, there are other labs that need to be checked. So the pituitary is kind of like the mom of the thyroid. So the mom sees that the kid is supposed to be cleaning his room and he's not cleaning the room. And so she goes in there and offers some stern advice about how quick he'd better get it done. This is one of the jobs of the pituitary gland. So if it sees that the thyroid hormone isn't making enough, T3, T4, all the different things that the thyroid does, it kicks in. The pituitary kicks in and starts pushing out thyroid stimulating hormone. So if they check your TSH and it's high, they're like, okay, their thyroid must not be functioning well because their pituitary keeps trying to kick the thyroid in the butt by stimulating thyroid, by putting out thyroid stimulating hormone. So you can have a totally normal TSH level, but your body also makes T3 and T4, and T3 is the active form of thyroid hormone. So some people have a normal TSH and have a normal T4, but they're non-converters. They're unable to convert the inactive T4 to active T3. And so their TSH can be just fine. Their T4 can be just fine. But if you don't check that T3, you have no idea if they're converting it. And that's why a lot of people with thyroid disorder feel like crap. And in those people, and sometimes they just need T3, and you hardly ever see T3 given. T3 is liothyronine. So if you're on thyroid medicine, you still have no energy, you feel terrible, your hair's falling out, you're hurting everywhere, your blood pressure's up, your cholesterol's up, your blood sugar's up. Those are signs that you're not converting. And so you need to have a complete thyroid panel done. And a lot of times people would go to the doctor and ask for a complete thyroid panel and get a TSH. Like these doctors it didn't even occur to them. And that there's no excuse for this, that they should check a TSH, a TPO to see if they have an autoimmune disorder that's causing dysfunction in the thyroid. That's almost never checked. I mean, unless you're growing a beard and you're a woman, they're not going to check that. And you need to check it because otherwise you're just throwing parts at it. You know what I mean? My Don would say this. He would say, I think this is what's going on with the car, but I'm going to take it up and have it diagnosed because I don't want to just throw parts at it. So like if you're depressed and you're depressed because your thyroid hormones are off, no amount of antidepressants is going to fix that. But what happens is they send you home on thyroid medicine. You don't feel better. So they don't do that. They just start you directly on an antidepressant and you don't feel better. So they add another one because by golly, Big Pharma has a second antidepressant meant to be added to a first antidepressant that's not working very well. And I'm like, okay, wait. If these antidepressants really work as you say, why aren't they working? Right? And why is this person's entire system falling out of line? Why are their triglycerides through the roof? They're not eating any differently than they were when their triglycerides were normal. Well, probably because their thyroid's off. And the thyroid affects everything else in the body. But what has happened is the sectioning of healthcare. So if you are having some sort of hormonal problem, and male or female, you might get sent to an endocrinologist. So now you have an endocrinologist managing that. And let's say you've got a heart problem too. So you're going to a cardiologist for that. And maybe you have arthritis. So you're seeing a rheumatologist for that. This is not the way medicine was ever meant to work, because most of those things can be handled by a primary care doctor, but there's not a lot of money in that. And the primary care doctor used to kind of be a jack of all trades. And unless your issue is complex and difficult to resolve, you didn't get sent to a specialist. In fact, primary care doctors often were general surgeons as well. And so you could go to your primary care doctor with a bellyache and he could check you out and say, wow, this is really suspicious for an appendicitis. Let's, do a CT scan. And he would see you had an appendicitis and he'd admit you to the hospital and do surgery on you. And then he'd take care of you post-op. Can you see how the fragmentation of that system is a problem? So now you have your primary care doctor who's just handling your basic stuff. You get sick, you need a physical, you're having some minor problem. But if it gets system specific, then they're like, oh, well, we better send you to a gastrointestinal doctor. There's no reason for that, but this is how they've been trained. And so I would challenge you to say to your doc, now, if you're a hard case and he can't get it fixed and he's tried, yes, don't ever stay with a doctor that doesn't know that he's out of his depth and won't refer you on. But if this is just basic stuff, I would say to the doctor, hey, you're trained to handle that, right? I would prefer that you handled my basic health and that we only went to a specialist if it was something that you couldn't handle. And ask your doctor that. Because they are now so trained that as soon as you express, oh my goodness, I'm having these terrible, terrible headaches. Okay, well, let's get you a neurology consult, which takes a month to get in, 2 months, right? It delays your care. And then you have this guy who's just handling your headaches, and he's not looking at your thyroid or other things that might be causing your headaches. He's just treating a headache. Well, a headache is a symptom that something else is going on. Wouldn't it behoove us to figure out what that something is? And this to me, and I guess as a nurse, I relate these things, but this to me is so much what we're seeing in our society. There's no basic fount of information that we all accept as true. Everything is fragmented. So if you want to know about different things that are going on in the culture, transgenderism, that sort of thing, well, then you would need to go to a gender clinic to find out about that. So, if you think that, your child, if now you're being trained to think that, because your little girl wants to, wear boys' clothes and play baseball, that she must now be a little boy. And the gender clinics will push you right along in that. And before, just a regular old family doctor would say, oh, that's normal. Kids do that. They go through these spells. They're playing with the gender roles. Your little boy is playing with dolls because he's practicing being nurturing like mommy. Your little girl is playing trucks because, she wants to get that out of her system and she wants to hang out with her brothers or her male friends. And instead of that just being the normal course of childhood exploration of trying to part of the reason that a little boy will engage in activities typically thought to be, girl activities, that is a God thing that's put in place, because as that little boy grows into a man, he has come up with an understanding, with an appreciation of that female gender role, right? And that's because he played around, his little sister said to him, okay, today I'll be the daddy and you be the mommy. Well, if that play is consistent now, it might end a little one up in a gender clinic. And we know this is normal. Most of us are old enough to understand that it's normal. We've seen it. Um, as though being interested in a particular activity or clothing or whatever suddenly now makes you not what you are. And this is the segmentation that we see in healthcare. So in the world, we're seeing this segmentation of, okay, well, if you've got a little boy or a little girl, then this is how they should act. And if they act somehow different from that, or they diverge from the norm, then there's something wrong. And you need to take them to a doctor to figure out what that something is, instead of just lovingly letting your child explore what they're exploring. And, you can intervene. You can say, well, little Bobby wants to wear a dress to the grocery store. And you say, sweetheart, those are great for dress up, but we're going out, and we need to dress appropriately for going out. That's it. That's all you have to say, right? My kids had a box. I would buy Halloween costumes on clearance. And we had this big like toy box that these costumes would be in, and they would switch and wear different costumes and just think it was hilarious. Jacob trying to walk in heels and the other two just cracking up. That's normal. Even if they do it a lot, that's normal. You just have to guide them back, and say, hey, sweetheart, the dresses are fun for dress up, aren't they? That's it. They're just fun for dress up. You're now defining the parameter for your kid. This isn't who you are. This doesn't mean something's wrong with you. They're fun for dress up. But we have turned this into, let's cut off their genitals. I mean, how extreme can we go? And as we go through this book, we're going to read of the goddess that existed during the Roman Empire, who was basically the goddess of transgenderism. She would have her soldiers cut off their genitals. She had reign in the month of June, though she reigned throughout, but her powerful month was the month of June. She was also the goddess of parade and pride. Does that sound like a god that is now revisiting us, that is possessing our culture? And when you understand it that way, it's a lot easier to have empathy for this person who's struggling, isn't it? Because a person possessed doesn't know they're a person possessed, do they? They just know what they're being fed. They're steeped in it. And now from being very little, they're steeped in it. And so it must be true. It must be true. The fact that I'm having trouble as a 14-year-old finding my peer group, and I feel like I don't belong anywhere. Well, now that is translated into, oh, well, probably what the problem is that you're not actually the gender you think you are. And the kids are like, oh, because they're looking to figure out, why am I other? Why am I picked last? Why? I don't understand why the kids don't want to play with me. And instead of working on those social skills and on encouraging your child to develop his gifts and talents so he can find a group, right? Because your gifts and talents are how you relate to groups in school. So, you put your kid, maybe they don't want to be in music, but you put them in music to see if that's something, once they're exposed to, that they'll embrace. And then when I joined band, I had been bullied and bullied and bullied. But when I joined band, I found my people. We had a common interest. Now, I could have gone the other way. I was very distressed by all of the changes that were happening in my body, to the point that I was putting an ace wrap around my chest in the 4th grade, because I was the only one in 4th grade with boobies and the boys were, snapping my bra. Today, I would be in a gender clinic. So I'm just trying to help you guys see the correlations. We're going to be doing these on Tuesdays. So the book is available on Amazon, and did I keep that? I did. Hold on. Let me share that screen with you, so you can see it. Now, be warned, there is a fake book with this exact same cover called The Return of the Gods. I don't know if it's on Audible or Kindle or if you can get that. But don't be mistaken. Make sure you're getting The Return of the Gods with Johnathan Cahn right here on the cover, okay? Because if not, you're going to get that fake book, and it's a total ripoff. So just make it's available in Kindle. It's available in it's not probably won't be free for you. Well, if you have an Audible trial, but if you don't want to sit down and read or you're busy, you can always listen to it, which is I love that about audiobooks. I buy hardbacks of all the books I love, so that I can keep them. So let me come back here and stop the screen share. But anyway, what do you guys have? What do you think about the first, how many chapters did we read? 7? 8. We read 8 chapters. They were quick reads though, I think. They weren't difficult at all. And let me know if the sound feels off or anything like that so that I can get it fixed. But we will be meeting every Tuesday until we finish, and then we'll pick another book. And whoever that was, please send me that suggestion. Well, hello, Lorraine. I've not seen you before. Welcome. Love when new people come. And just so you guys know, if you watch other podcasts on Rumble or YouTube or whatever, I kind of have a different format. I'm trying to get my other screen back here. Hold on. I do it differently. So I do a Friday night live stream. It starts at 8:30, and it is basically me looking at the current events that are happening in relationship to the near-death experience I had where I met God, and interpreting it through that filter, to give us some clarity, because clarity is hard to find these days. But that show is at 8:30 Eastern on Fridays, and we just go until we run out of steam. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 hours. Generally, it's 2 or 3. But you can tune in anytime, and I always read the chat comments, and I will always read the chat comments going forward as well, because this is a collaboration. This isn't just the Nurse Penny show. I'm a nurse. I have to have people, to be able to do my work. And so you put a comment up, I'm going to read it, whether you leave a donation or not. On Rumble, you can leave donations. The donations are appreciated. They help cover costs, but definitely not required. And so, don't be shocked when you pop in a comment that I read it out loud, because you're just as much a part of the podcast as I am. Okay. So don't be afraid to ask a question, you guys. If you hear something, you don't know what that means or whatever, everybody starts out in a different place, and that's okay. And I want you to be brave and say the question, because I'm not going to be rude or anything. And there's probably 10 other people who have the same question. And so let's just get it answered, and it always helps expound on the topic when you guys participate. So I want to encourage you to do that going forward. But that's all I had for today. We will be back Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. And we'll probably start a little after that. I kind of like to play a little video or something, to give people time to get settled in and to make sure that it's working on all the platforms. So we'll probably start around 5 after. But let me close us out in prayer. And thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you guys sharing this time with me. It is very important that we have fellowship, because there's so little fellowship to be had today. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time with my friends, and for putting this book in my path, and Johnathan Cahn especially. What a fascinating person. And and if you guys didn't know, and God knows, he was an atheist. So this is all the more poignant to me. And I just thank you, God, for his conversion, and for, and to be a Messianic Jew. I mean, wow. I just thank you for that. I thank you for this book to help explain these times so that we know what we're fighting against. It's just been so confusing and off-putting and scary. And just thank you for just dropping that book in my path so that we could start reading it and making sense of this, and getting our minds and hearts battle ready, not in a violent way, but spiritually battle ready for what's happening. And we can't do that if we don't understand what's happening. So I just thank you so much for dropping that wisdom on me, and letting me share it with other people. And let me bless every single person that's here today, and every person that will come and watch the replay. Bless them, Lord. Bless them to overflowing. Where there's lack in their life, I pray that you would bring plenty. Where there's loneliness, I pray that you'd bring companionship. Where there's loss, I pray that you would fill that and bring restoration. For people who are struggling with family members that seem to have completely lost their minds, I pray that you would help us to love them, and you would help us to believe and have faith and pray, and pray believing, not just hollow prayers, hard prayers where we are crying out to you to help. And most of all, Father, I just want to repent for the things that I've done and said and thought that are wrong, and for our entire group. We all fall short. And I just want to apologize on behalf of all of us for that, and to ask you to forgive us and help us turn it around and help us see you in a new light, and help us feel that fire of the Holy Spirit within us, because we're feeling pretty empty and we need that to refill us and revive us and drive us forward. Lord, bring revival. It is the only thing that can save us. Let the Holy Spirit fall on this land and drive out the gods. Father, we pray for children, especially for children who don't even have the opportunity to escape the womb. So many times people will complain about what's wrong with the world, and how could a God, a loving God, allow so many cruel things? And I say to them, perhaps he sent the answer 1,000,000 times over, and we snuffed it out before it ever took its first breath. Father, forgive us for that. Forgive us for saying nothing as it's gone on, as millions of children were ended. The blood is on our hands, Father, because we said nothing. We did nothing. We justified it, and we looked away. Forgive us for that, Father. Cleanse our hearts of that sin. Cleanse us of the guilt and the shame for not coming forward and being afraid to come forward, and make us bold. Make us courageous. Help us stand up for what is right, and help us run out these gods that are seeking to come back with 7 more evil spirits, every one of them. We don't want to be overrun. We don't want to lose our country. We don't want to lose our faith or our direction. We just thank you so much for this, Lord. We thank you for every person here, no matter what their faith or even lack thereof. And we just pray that you would make this a time of coming together and fellowship in you. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, guys, I'm going to read you one thing, and then we're done. You find it here. And this is something I sent to my friend. And if you've followed me for a while, you might have heard it. But it's okay. We can read it again, right? Okay, this is called The Warrior. I can't remember when I wrote this. Okay, thank you so much. I will check that. Lorraine, so sweet. When the time came for me to decide whether to stay with God, so for those of you who don't know, I had a near-death experience. If you're tuning in a little bit late, I went into respiratory failure and coded and left my body and was with God. And so a lot of people follow me because they've heard that story, seen videos on YouTube or whatever, and that just gives you a little bit of my backstory. So when the time came for me to decide whether to stay with God or return to my body, my knee-jerk reaction was to stay with God. But somehow I knew that wasn't the right choice. There, in the presence of the Creator, I wondered, could I make myself go back? Could I tear down the walls I'd spent a lifetime building and let people in? Could I at least try? God had loved me so completely, filling me with his light. If I opened my heart and released his light and love, letting it spill out of me and onto everyone within my reach, would it leave me empty? I didn't know. What I did know was that choosing not to go back and at least try would be to throw away the opportunity God gave me to impact the world and its people for him. It would be akin to theft. Choosing not to go back would also make me less courageous, less wise, less loving, less prudent, less kind. Choosing not to go back meant robbing others of the gifts and talents I had to offer and the love I had to give. Choosing the easier path would cost me the incredible joy of living a life filled with purpose. I'd wasted so much time hiding behind walls that in truth provided little safety. There were so many things I couldn't get back, lost forever, because I'd turned a key and locked my heart away. I wasn't sure if I could go back and become who God designed me to be. That person to me seemed a stranger. Maybe I could just start by tearing down those walls. Once the walls were down, maybe I'd be strong enough to live in the fullness of God, each day courageously making my mark on the world, leaving it better than I found it. I could lift people up and try living a life that inspired others to do the same. Suddenly, the easy choice, staying where I was to avoid all the trials and heartaches of life, came into godlike focus. To stay would be an act of cowardice and selfishness. It would be beneath me. God revealed that at my conception, he had knit me together with his own hands, delighting in his work. I'm sure his thoughts were much like those of most parents as he imagined my life and the good I would do. I'm sure he saw the tragedies and hardships that would befall me and knit in strands of extra strong thread to carry me through. My Father was designing me on purpose for a purpose. At my birth, he kissed my lips, instilling the breath of life in me, and whispered, "Go, child, live in awe, love in full. I've given you the spirit of a lion. When trials come, don't shrink from them. Stand tall, stick out your chest, and roar. Even when you feel you can't win, especially when you feel you can't win, roar. You are a warrior. Show courage. When the battle comes, look to your left and to your right, then look behind you. You will see the Lord your God has surrounded you with a multitude ready to charge at your signal. Choose your battles with wisdom, and when the battle chooses you, remember who made you, stand tall, and roar. Focus your heart on what is just and kind and beautiful. By doing this, you will know when to fight, where to fight, and what weapons to use. Where there is suffering, use kindness. Where there is injustice, use wisdom and strength of character. Where there is chaos, use soft words and a level head. Most importantly, where you find hopelessness, give him no sanctuary. If God's people lose hope, all that remains is defeat. When you hear the distant drumbeat of hopelessness, do not tarry. Awaken your troops and call on the Lord. Hopelessness cloaks his depravity in darkness, advancing his troops by night. Stand ready. Pull from your quiver the promises of God, and when the footfalls of hopelessness draw near, take aim and annihilate him. As your enemy falls, light will overtake the darkness. I am with you. I'm fighting for you. I'm crafting others to stand beside you and give you strength. You are never alone. I am with you, even unto the end of the age. When God showed me how my life began, how he'd lovingly assembled every facet of my being, something inside me changed. The bricks I'd stacked to shield and protect my heart from ever being broken again began to shake. I wasn't going to need a sledgehammer to tear down that wall. God was going to blow that Goliath apart with cannon fire. All I had to do was stand back, wait for the dust to settle, then climb that rubble, and at the top of my lungs declare, "No more." It still gets me. I knew I would stumble and fall as I climbed that rubble. I knew I'd get hurt along the way. But I was done living in a prison of my own design. I was done acting as my own jailer. I was done cowering from life with half-hearted, half-living. I decided I was going back. I was going back as a new creation. No more would I believe the lies about who I was or what I could and couldn't accomplish. Never again would I look for encouragement from those who so willfully withheld it. I will no longer play the role of assistant to people who had subtly convinced me I wasn't enough. The days of my engaging in my own undoing were over. Would people find the new me strange? Perhaps. Would they call me crazy and remind me of every time I'd failed? Probably. Would I put out my wrists and ankles to again be shackled and shuffle back into that cell? No. Not just no, hell no. Let the naysayers say what they will, but I was done living a life of defeat and retreat. Even if I had to crawl across that finish line, I was going to finish. I was going to live. It hasn't been easy. In fact, it's been harder than before. But somehow that light that God filled me with on that day, I left my body in the emergency room and crossed the divide, has sustained me. I am making a difference, and I want you to know that you can make a difference. You were designed to make a difference. Once you make that choice to climb the rubble and reclaim your life, God will send warriors to help you. So you keep going. You keep pushing forward, especially when it's hard. Know that there are legions of angels in heaven conspiring for your good and cheering you on. I stand in agreement with them. My mother-in-law once told me, "Oh, querida," translation, dear one, "your spirit is so big. It shines all around you." She saw that and boldly declared it, even though I couldn't see it at the time. An angel in the flesh speaking the truth of God over me. So stand strong and tall, my friends. Dare defeat to try and stop you. Stare him down and watch him cower and shrink away as you charge full on toward him. Use his shoulder as a foothold and vault right over the top of him, leaving him to proclaim, "Wow, who was that?" That was a warrior, designed by the Most High God. Think twice before challenging her again. Next time, she'll be carrying your head in her hand. And that's it, guys. Oh, you needed the warrior story. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that blessed you guys. It just blesses me beyond measure that God through me can write something that still speaks to people today. They're the same truths that he's been whispering into our spirits for a long time, but the cacophony in this world has gotten so loud that it's hard to hear it anymore, isn't it? It's hard to discern it. But you guys, we've got it, and we can do it. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to fight. We're going to lose. We're going to lose a lot. Okay. That, losing is just what you got to step over to get to victory, and it's okay. So I don't want you to feel disheartened when things get super hard and everything in the world seems to be going against you. Oh, why can't you just accept this? And why can't you just accept that? And it's not that I don't understand or I can't understand that people are going through some very dark things that are making them very different from how they were designed. I get that. But I won't be forced to embrace it or endorse it. I just won't. I won't. My gender affirmation to you, to anybody who's struggling, is to affirm the body that you're in. There's nothing wrong with you. You're beautiful. You were designed by perfection. And your head gets mixed up and your spirit gets mixed up and you feel lost and you embrace some things that aren't good for you because maybe there's no one to guide you and help you do better. But you can always do better. You can make that choice today. If you've just been a mess your whole life, today can be the beginning of something totally different. God has a plan for you. You were created on purpose, for a purpose, for such a time as this. All right, guys, I love you whole big bunches. If you join us on Friday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern for the Nurse Penny Show, we will cover current events from a faith-based perspective, and I will vent my frustrations about how crazy the world is, and we can enjoy that time together, or you can just come hang out for book club on Tuesdays at 10 a.m., okay? Please share this, and please hit like before you go. Like really helps. I think if there's nothing else that you know what to do in the world, hitting like really helps. And if you don't know what to do, like at this point in your life, like where do I plug in? How do I begin to make change? If you're struggling with that, I always tell people, if you don't know what to do, support the people who do. Support them with your blessings and your prayers and your finances, because that's the only way we keep these kind of things going for people. It helps divert a lot of the weight of the cost for us. And the way that you keep the good things in the world is by supporting the good things. No matter, it doesn't have to be me, anybody that speaks to you, you can be a part of that their ministry. And, ministry isn't always in church. Ministry is us every day walking the walk. Okay. And so support those people, because it really does make a difference, and it really does keep us going, so that it's not so financially burdensome for us to do it. If you want to donate, you can go to my webpage. It's, let me put that in there for you. I usually put the links up, but I don't know. I kind of fell off today. It was early. Let me make sure I've got the address right. My webpage has everything on it, how to donate, how to get in touch with me. And you're right. I do need to get those up there and be more diligent about that. I always have to, I never can remember if it's, yeah. Okay, so here's the website. Posted that on Rumble, and I am now posting it for everybody else. Silly me. And my email, I think my Twitter, and I can't see, my Twitter and everything is all linked up there. Witthealth. My H isn't showing up. That's weird. I could type. And then let me see if I can put it up on a banner. Create a banner. so everybody can see it on the screen just in case, because what happens when the Rumble stops is that all of the Rumble rants go away. So you won't be able to see what I've posted. Witthealthcoaching.com. All right, add banner. And let's activate. All right. And next time I will make sure to put that up on the screen. I apologize for that, guys. That's my bad there. All right. If nobody has anything else, I'm going to close us out for today. Thank you so much for coming. We will start, I think, what did I say, with chapter 9? Yep, we'll start with chapter 9. If you guys want to read ahead and formulate questions, I encourage you to do that. Oh, wait, I missed a comment from Eva. Eva, I am so sorry, honey. I try not to miss comments. What's the point of making comments if nobody's going to read them, right? Eva Berg, here we go, love. Thank you so much. God bless. Much love from Norway. Well, that's so cool. When would I ever get an opportunity to speak to somebody from Norway? I'm just going to pop up some of these comments. Kick ass, says Kay. Thank you, Kay. All right. I think that's it. Oh, no, one more. Pamela snuck in there, didn't you, Pamela? Pamela says, I would love, love, love it if you could just do a recording of that particular writing you did from your near-death experience so folks could share it. It would encourage and bless multitudes. Love you to the moon. Pamela, I will do that. I will do it as a video recording. I'll put it up on Rumble, and I will link it to YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And that way you've got it, and you can share that writing. And maybe I could get through it without tearing up this time. I try not to, but God's powerful. He overwhelms me quite a bit. But I will get that done before I even leave my seat here. All right, guys, love you whole big bunches. I will see you on Friday, and if not, I'll see you on Tuesday. You guys stay safe, stay strong, and be bold and courageous in the Lord.